Hello, everybody. Greetings to all. Welcome to the Snooker Hole podcast. I'm Dan Murren. As many of you will know, one of the aims of this podcast is to speak with people from different parts of the snooker world, to hear new perspectives, to learn a little bit more about the sport that we enjoy so much. To that end, I'm delighted to welcome a very special guest to the Snooker Hole podcast today. He's a former snooker referee. Indeed, his final match was the World Championship final this year. But he's here today to talk about his current role as Tournament Director for WST. It's an honour to welcome Paul Collier to the Snooker Hall podcast.
Hi Dan, morning.
So before we get into your role as Tournament Director, I'm always interested to hear how you got into snooker in the first place.
It goes back a long way. Basically, my parents used to run a social club in Newport, where I'm from, back when I was probably 5 or 6, and the snooker room in that club was basically off limits. I wasn't allowed in there. That was where all the men went, and nobody was allowed in. But as time went on, I started to stick my head around the door every now and again, and to be fair, all the guys that were playing, they were quite welcoming, and I went in and sat down and watched them, and I think that's where the obsession started. I didn't begin playing until I was probably 12 or 13, but I'd kept watching it and kept involved with it. And I suppose it was only when I was about 12 or 13 I was big enough to reach the table and could actually have a game then. So, yeah, it all progressed from there, really.
So you started playing, maybe you hear about some kids starting when they're 6, 7 years old. So a little bit later. Are you a good player?
I used to make 100 breaks in practice. Yeah,
Oh my
I could play
God.
a little bit.
Just a bit, yeah. Okay. So what is your high break?
Yeah, 123 is my highest in practice. And I never made 100 in a match, unfortunately, but I had a few 80s and 90s. But yeah, I used to play local league stuff and play a few pro-am events and things like that. So kept my interest going.
123 though. That's not too shabby. God, that's 100 more than mine. Mine is 23. So
Oh,
hold
right, okay.
on. But you well, I suppose you were more known for being a snooker referee. You had your final match at the Crucible this year. That's got to be a pretty special way to end that part of your involvement in snooker.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd started refereeing professionally in 1992 when the game went open, and we went to Blackpool and we had 700 pros and 22 tables, 3 sessions a day for nearly 3 months. It was a good way to learn your trade. You were refereeing non-stop. It's an opportunity that referees don't get now, really, because we don't play that sort of block qualifying. But yeah, it was a good way to learn. So I went there and went through that and just slowly progressed. I picked up a really good job working for a television company called Alston Elliott, and they did TV graphics. So when I was refereeing, if I wasn't at the main events, because obviously I'd only just started out, I worked for them. So all the scores that you saw at the bottom of the screen, all the captions, that was me operating the system doing that. So that kept me in the game. Excuse me. And then yeah, then it all progressed. I had a phone call in 2001 from the then chief executive of World Snooker, Jim McKenzie. And, he said, look, you're doing a lot of refereeing for other people. You're doing Premier League for Matchroom and all these other things, but you're not working for us. So would you like to take the plunge? And that's basically what I did. I left the job at Alston Elliott with some regret, because that was a great job. I had some good friends there and worked with some good people. But I thought, if I don't do it now, I never will. And there was the great Peter Allis once said about a Welsh golfer by the name of Philip Price, and Phil had a good couple of seasons, ended up playing in the Ryder Cup, and sold everything up, went to Florida. Unfortunately for him, it didn't work out, but Peter Allis said, well, at least he'll never die not knowing. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, that was for me. I get into it and I try, and I know whether it's for me or not. And he had a great time for a few years. Then things went a little bit pear-shaped. Jim McKenzie left World Snooker, and the people that were appointed to replace him, I didn't like what they did. They didn't run the company very well. They didn't look after any staff or players very well. We were down to 5 ranking events a season, had 2 big pay cuts within a couple of months. We basically had to go back. There was a group of 6 referees at the time, and we told them, look, if you don't increase the pay, we've already done our contracted days. We don't need to be at the World Championships. It was that badly mismanaged. They hadn't realised that we'd done our days. And at the end of that, I went to them, and said, look, this isn't working out. Can I have the money back? Is there a different role? They said no, so I left. It was with a bit of regret, but I didn't upset anybody. I didn't sell my story, even though a few people wanted the story. I didn't do that because I always hoped one day I'd be able to come back. All I hoped was they didn't kill the game off in that time. Fortunately, they didn't, and then Barry Hearn took over. So I had a phone call from my old boss, Nigel Oldfield, within 2 or 3 days of Barry signing up. Again, I just happened to pick up the phone at the right time, and he said, "How do you fancy coming back?" But part of the proviso was I knew I couldn't referee forever. So, the deal would be that they'd train me up to be a tournament director, and I could referee for as long as I was comfortable doing it, and they wanted me, and then the tournament director's role would fall into place later, and that's exactly what's happened.
So it's not been too long since you've, how would you say it, hung up your gloves, maybe? But is there anything that you're missing straight away? The buzz of the arena,
No, I hadn't really because I'm still at a lot of events, I'm still involved. I'm still seeing the players. I'm still seeing the other referees, all my friends and colleagues. I didn't miss refereeing, which surprised me. I thought I would want to be out there with the gloves on until I got to York. And then being in York, because, that's one of the best arenas in the world. And getting there, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing another couple of matches. But no, it's all behind me now. And like you said, doing the world final to finish that was a great experience. I thought when I did my second world final, I thought that would be it. I didn't think I'd get another one. So the third was a bonus, and then to finish with the world final, that was unbelievable.
yeah, that's going out on top. Yeah.
Mm, very
This
much.
part of the agreement or part of the deal you had with Barry Hearn was that you eventually would move into this role of tournament director. I
Mm.
mean, maybe I'm not completely alone here. What does a tournament director do?
It's a very big role. I mean, the big perk for me is being able to do a bit more work from home now because not all the work is done on site. So we deal with a lot of the build up to the tournament, the setting up of the event. The easy bit really is being on site and getting the players to the table on time and playing the matches. There's three main tournament directors. There's myself, there's Mike Ganley, who's been around since God was a lad. And then there's Martin Clark. So between us, we sort of share the roles and responsibilities out. So Mike, he now looks at all the venues. He goes in advance, plans the venues out, works with the rigging crew, on designing a final set plan. Then you've got Martin will look after most of the staffing. So he'll book the referees, the security, work on accommodation lists and those sorts of things. And then I tend to look after the rules related stuff, obviously with the refereeing background, but I also do logistics. So we've got all our scoring kit, all our equipment, all the TV monitors we need, the computers, the servers, the network. So I look after getting all that shipped around the country. Obviously, we've got a very busy month this month because we've got tournaments running back to back. We had UK qualifiers, which was, I think there was only a 2 day break, and then we were into the UK final stages in York. We finished York on Sunday. We're into Wednesday now when the shootout starts today. When the shootout finishes on Saturday, some of the boys have got Sunday off, but most of them are travelling to Edinburgh. And then we've got the tournament in Edinburgh next week. And then from Edinburgh, I'm going out to Riyadh. And while I'm in Riyadh, we've also got qualifiers taking place. So it's all this equipment needs to be shipped around, all the logistics of it, getting it in the right place at the right time. So that's my other role. We have a great system in World Snooker called SIMS, which is Snooker Information Management System, and it's basically a core computer program and database, if you like. And then everything is run from there. So right down to the players entering the tournaments, they enter via SIMS. When we get to venues, they book their practice via SIMS. We build the tournament in SIMS. SIMS controls the live scoring. So there's a lot of work on that to be done as well. So I mean, just yesterday, Martin Clark and I spent most of the day on the phone for each other and like a virtual meeting, doing the formats for the qualifiers that are coming up because we couldn't do the draws any sooner because we needed the seeding cut-off points and the rankings. They all came up after the UK Championship. So we sat down yesterday and formatted that event and who's going to play where and when. And that was quite difficult because a lot of the top players, they have to play one round in the World Open, which is the last of the qualifiers. But of course, they're going to be in Riyadh until at least the 21st. And the last day of the qualifiers is the 22nd. So we have to schedule those to play that day and as late as possible to give them a chance to get home. So there's all these things in the background that, a lot of people don't realise go on. But, between us, we control it all and we make it work.
And this idea of logistics, I was a curiosity from me is, do you have to work within a specific budget, or do you just work it out and say to World Snooker, this is how much it costs, pay it? How does that
Um,
work?
we have budgets, but we own all the equipment. That's the good thing. We've got almost two full sets of kit now that belong to us. So the main part of it is just paying for transporting it around. But there's a lot of other stuff involved. We have the actual set, the bit around the table where we had the LED set in York, where we can put all the adverts on and it's all lit and it all looks wonderful. We've got the older sets, which are just they've got some LED lights in them, but they're static and they look nice. That they take a lot of transporting. I mean, there's probably three complete Arctic wagons would go to a ranking event with all the kit on it, because you've got all the metallic trussing that supports the lighting rig up in the roof, and there's all these things. I mean, I don't actually book that stuff. That's out of my technical knowledge. That's down to the great company we have that do all our rigging for us. They're called Transport. And they're based in Retford in Nottingham, so they've got a warehouse there. That's where we store everything. And they provide the wagons and do a lot of the build. All I do is tell them from World Snooker's perspective, which boxes and trunks and which bits of kit to take.
So again, trying to use my own personal experience to bring up questions here. I live in Denmark at the moment, and I know that if I order something from Amazon UK, maybe 5, 6 years ago, it was easy. But now with Brexit, I now have to sign customs forms. It takes a little bit longer for delivery. How difficult is it to work out logistics, for example, the German masters and even going overseas? You mentioned Riyadh. Is that something that has become a problem? Or
It's not a problem, but it's become more time consuming. I totally agree. There's a lot more paperwork now. We work off a system. It's an internationally accepted system called a carnet, at ATA Carnet. So we deal with the Chamber of Commerce in Bristol because our head office is in Bristol. So I basically submit a full list of equipment that I want to take out of the country. Obviously, we're not importing or exporting, we're just moving kit there to use and to bring back. So I will have to plan. I mean, even down to when we take tables, you have to list the number of nuts and bolts and washers that that you're taking out and bringing back. So you list everything. I mean, the first year of after Brexit, where we had to prepare everything, that was tough. That there is a lot of cutting and pasting goes on now, if I'm honest with you. But yeah, you submit that document, you give the Chamber of Commerce you try and give them at least a week's notice. Then you have to pay a hefty bond. I mean, if we're taking out 300 or 400,000 pounds worth of equipment, the bond can probably be £100,000 that we have to log with them just to prove that we fully intend to bring it back. And then as soon as we import it, well, not import it, but bring it back into the country, all the paperwork gets stamped, we send it back in, and the money gets released back to us. So there's a lot of that going on. But I mean, it's not just things like German Masters. We now have to fill in a carnet just for Belfast. Belfast is part of the UK, which has never really made sense to me why we have to do it, but it's because of the border crossings and things like that. So, yeah, it's a bit more involved. Riyadh's not such a big one because the government of Saudi Arabia and the King's offices, they're very involved with us. So they make that process a lot easier. They understand what we do. They've got people waiting for us at the airport when we take the kit in. We have to fly a lot of it out there. There are issues at the moment. It's basically crossing international waters. Unfortunately, there's conflicts in the world at the moment, and it's not safe to transport a lot of stuff by ship. So, we actually fly 2 tables out there and fly a lot of the equipment, and they get met at the airport and shipped around that way. I'll be carrying a lot of the equipment with me in what we call pelly cases, which is like a big hard plastic suitcase, because that's the easiest way to transport it. I mean, it's not cheap to do it. You imagine just paying for a normal suitcase to carry it on a plane. There's a lot of cost and a lot of expense, and but at least I know the kit's it's in my hand. And it's always going to arrive, and we're working on tight timescales. So if anything went missing, if something goes in the hold and it doesn't arrive the other end, we've only got a day or two to get it replaced, to be able to make a tournament work. So that's why I'd rather be carrying things with me for jobs like that. And with Riyadh only being 1 table, it is a lot easier. I think, when we had the big 8 table event back in August, we had to plan a heck of a lot further with that one. Tables were shipped from China. They had to go in about 4 months before, and then it took about a month for them to clear customs. And obviously, there's only a certain supply of tables in the world. So when you've got them tied up for that time, and we're playing other events in the UK in different places, it's very involved, but it's an interesting aspect. It's an interesting part of the job. So.
And this is just the equipment. What about the players? I mean, if a player does have, maybe, well, we saw it most notably with Hussein Vavai. Years ago, he struggled to get a visa to be in the UK. Is that something that WST would help with? And as a tournament director, is that part of the remit, or is that just
No, not
not?
really. That would come under the WPBSA banner. Now, for those that don't understand the system, the WPBSA basically they own snooker. They own the copyright to the rules. They own the World Championship trophy. So in that respect, that they own the sport. And then WST, who I work for, they're the commercial arm. So WPBSA employ WST to do all the commercial side, to run the events. They employ the staff, and they do all that. I mean, ultimately, a lot of the bills go back to WPBSA. But there's a former player called Neil Tompkins, who actually we knew each other growing up. He's from Newport, which is just a coincidence. But Neil is a player liaison officer, so he looks after all that, all that type of thing. We've got certain contacts now within the Home Office, and we can get. I won't say we can get anybody a visa, but there's a process where they recognise us now as an official governing body of a sport. And things are a little bit easier. The Chinese players have to get visas, obviously. Hussein, there's lots of countries involved now. We've got Brazilian players on tour. We've got all these different things. So the WPBSA deal with a lot of that. I try and stay away from that side of it because it's well out of I'm well out of my depth with that. Give me a draw and six tables and I'll put an event on. But there's limits to what I can do. So.
And I suppose another point of travel is, as you say, that you're working more from home these days. That's a nice little benefit. Is there what was the your favourite venue to travel to for a snooker event?
I think everybody would say the Crucible, to actually to get there to referee in that arena. Obviously, I'm not refereeing now, but the history of the Crucible, the background to it. Sheffield's a great place as well. It's a lovely city, and I've literally spent years there over the years. The amount of time, because every time I go to the World Championship, between the qualifiers and the main event, I'm probably away for a month. It is 28, 29 days. So with all the years I've done that, I've spent a lot of time there. But yeah, I mean, so the Crucible's good. I love York. York at this time of year, that's a fantastic place, because as well as the venue being great, the venue staff are always good. They've looked after us for many years. You've got the Christmas markets in York, and it's a beautiful city again. I mentioned Belfast. I love Belfast. Irish people are, they're almost as nice as the Welsh. They're company. They're great hosts, and great fun to be around. So. Yeah, there's lots of sides to it. There's some venues that people think, oh, I'll watch it on TV and think that must be a great venue. And actually, it's probably not. I mean, the Crucible would be a prime example of that. It's nowhere near big enough for what we need. But it's such a great venue, such a great arena with such great history. We do our best to make it work. And, well, I suppose, look, long may it stay there.
Well, I actually just received a question on that this morning, so I'll bring that up in a moment. Well, over the summer, I spoke to Mandy Fisher, and she did say that knowing players, knowing just different individuals, different personalities on the tour, it has made her job just that little bit easier because she has that existing relationship. As a tournament director, is this something that helps you in some ways but can be a negative? How does that dynamic work in terms of the transition from referee to TD?
I think it definitely helps. I don't see negatives. I mean, I suppose the only tough part, it was the same when I was refereeing, is obviously you do get on very well with these people. You spend your life traveling around with them and working with them. But players are, you spend as much time with those as you do with some of your refereeing colleagues. So we don't tend to fall out. There can be situations at the table where a player thinks you've made a wrong decision or doesn't like the decision you've made, and you can exchange words after a match. And that's obviously, that's never pleasant, but that's a part of the job. You can do that in an office if you're just working all day with somebody. There's times you're not going to agree, and you may well fall out. But I think the good thing with snooker is, over. I mean, I was refereeing before a lot of these players ever even dreamed of being on tour. It's 33, yeah, 33rd season this year. So I seem to have been around for most of their careers, and we do all generally get on. I mean, as a tournament director, you sometimes have to tell players things that they don't want to hear. There's issues with dress code and different things, things they may have said around a venue that perhaps they shouldn't have, and it gets reported back, and, you have to deal with it. But I think as long as you deal with it in the right way, then the players respect you for it. I think it was harder with refereeing. I mean, I always said that there were two types of referee. That's in all the years I've been involved, I've only met two types. And there's the type of referee who wants to be involved in snooker matches, and there's a type of referee who wants to be in charge of snooker matches. And the ones that want to be in charge generally don't do very well. They're out there thinking that they're more important than the players and it's all about them, and that isn't the case. It's actually all about the players, and you're just controlling it from a rules and regulations point of view. And I think everybody I've got on tour now, every one of the referees that works for us, is very much of the same opinion. So
There's no Mike Dean type referees. I think he's the one that really gets the most. Oh, Mike Dean always wants to make it about himself. I think he's retired now, actually, but it's
yeah, I don't think we have any of that with us. I
good.
think we all know our place is you are out there. You have a difficult job to do. You've got a lot of concentration to put in. But it isn't about you, and I think we all know that. So that's how we all get on so well.
And another question about referees. We have a senior referee, Jan Verhaas, if I'm not mistaken. Is
Yep.
that, in terms of the scheduling of referees who will referee which match, is that something he controls, or is that part of the tournament director's remit?
Yeah, Jan has a big say in who does the finals. He is the most senior referee. I should have mentioned it when I mentioned tournament directors because he works as an assistant tournament director with us now as well. So he's learning the role that I've learned over the years. Jan will have a list of referees and try and share the work out fairly. Obviously, those we have bandings within referees. We have an A band, a B band, and a C band. The A banders will get more work because they're the more experienced and they're at the later stages of tournaments. So it's Jan's role to share that work around. And then, he will decide, well, he'll share the finals around as well. There's only so many in a season. And you try and make sure everybody gets their fair share of the big matches. So, yeah, between us all, Martin and I, whoever's on site from a TD perspective, we will work with Jan on that as well. But yeah, it's all about being part of the team and making it work.
Do you have a few minutes to answer some emails from listeners?
Yeah, sure.
Wonderful. First email is from Brian McGovern. Hi Dan, looking forward to the episode with Paul Collier. I've noticed at times there have been scoreboard issues at some of the tournaments. Has it ever happened at the Crucible? What seems to be the issue causing them?
So the system I spoke about earlier, the SIMS system, Snooker Information Management System, the scoring is linked to that. It's everything is linked to one. That's why we run one complete network. So all the scores go back to SIMS, even down to the point where SIMS pays the prize money to the players. It triggers bank payments, it works out rankings, it does everything. We decided a few years ago to upgrade the system. It was, I wouldn't say it was out of date. I mean, it did the job, but there were ways that we could improve it. So we decided basically to start again. And the company we were working with previously, they were going into other things. So we looked for somebody and we came up with a great company called IMG Arena. So we tasked them with writing a new version of Sims and writing us a new scoring system to bolt onto the back of it and to make it all work. Now, they understood all the complexities of a database and how all that worked. Obviously, understanding snooker inside out, which is what you need to do if you're going to write a program for scoring, that was something that they struggled with a little bit. Now, they wrote a system for us, and it seemed to do everything we needed. But then when there were changes made at the back end, they affected the scoring and the side that a lot of people see. Any changes in Sims, nobody sees other than us. And it was finding a balance between that. And we had a horrible spell of probably 12 months where there were lots of issues with the scoring because it seemed to be that was the bit that everybody sees. Now, obviously, it was far from ideal because you don't want to be distracting the players when the scoring system breaks down. But we had a really tricky spell where that was happening on a regular basis, and it was beyond most people's control. A lot of people on social media were absolutely slating World Snooker for it, and we certainly weren't proud of it, and we were trying our best to put it right. But I don't think anybody realised the complexities of what we do. I think a lot of people can write a program that will display a scoreboard and just put scores out for players at the table. But this is so much more involved than that. And, we also changed our website to a completely new company. And the integration of the scoring between the website, when sometimes the website didn't work properly, sometimes the scoring didn't work properly. We had so many issues, but I think we're on the right side of that now. I think we're coming out of it. There wasn't one, I don't think there was one shot in the whole of York where we had a problem. I had no issues at the Champion of Champions with the scoring system. I'm sure it'll all be fine at the shootout, and we're working our way through it. I say it wasn't pleasant. Nobody wanted it to be that way, but that's transition. That happens in life when you want to improve things and change things. You end up with the problems that go with it. I think the question that came from Brian was about, has it happened at the Crucible? I don't remember the scoring system breaking down at the Crucible. I do remember every now and again we've had monitors have broken down, because we only use sort of 49 or 55-inch televisions. And if you have one of those in your house and you have it on for 14 hours a day, eventually it's going to break down at some point. And we've had those issues, but I think with the scoring system in general at the Crucible, it's been very good.
And an email from Kim. Hi, a question for Paul Collier. If a player has a complaint about the conditions or a referee has a problem with travel, do they go through you? As far as I understand, one of the responsibilities of a tournament director is to be the conduit between the people at the tournament and WST. Is that right? Thanks for the podcast. Keep up the good work. Kim.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That there's a full process, and this has been publicised recently because the players have been very critical of some of the playing conditions and some of the tables. And there is a process to follow. Coming off the table and going into a press conference and saying that table was rubbish isn't really going to get you anywhere. Coming in to see the tournament director, we have a table conditions report form, which they all understand how to fill in rather. It's got a diagram of a snooker table. If the table was running off in any way, you can draw arrows on it to show where it was going. You can write down anything you want on there if you felt the cushions weren't playing right, if you felt the bedcloth wasn't responsive or the bedcloth was too fast or too slow. There's all these things you can write on there, and then my job immediately then is to submit that report to the table fitters. I generally go and find them wherever they are within the building, sit down with them, discuss it with them, ask them to go and have a look at it, ask them what we can do about it. Some things are out of our control. We had a recent event at Cheltenham where we had the worst weekend of weather that I can remember, where it just rained constantly. Everywhere was flooded. I was travelling from Newport, where I live, to Cheltenham, which is about a 50-minute drive, and it took me 3 hours the one night to get home just because there was that much surface water on the roads. Now, when you get things like that, obviously there's humidity, and unfortunately, humidity is a massive enemy for snooker because we use a pure wool cloth. Now, even though you've got under table heating, once the damp gets into the cloth, it's very tough to get rid of. So you imagine 800, maybe 1,000 people coming in that evening who've walked through the rain to get there. They've all got wet coats. There's certain things that are out of our control. But players have genuine issues, and it's not for the want of trying. The table fitters will do things. I ended up in Cheltenham when the weather broke a little bit. I took the decision to recover the tables and have a different roll of cloth sent from the warehouse because I knew that hadn't been stored within the venue, where we had this humidity issue. And it did make a big difference. But again, logistically, it's getting enough table fitters on site to be able to recover 4 tables overnight, be able to recover the practice. But it is important. So it's finding that balance of, can we do it? Logistically, is there time? Cost doesn't really come into it because, to be fair to the companies, WPBSA and WST, we want to deliver the best product. We want the players to be happy, and we want the public to see it as good as it can be. So there's these sorts of things. They have to report them back to us, and we deal with them in the best way possible. So
Well, that has
I've always
become relevant, hasn't it?
sorry.
No, I was
Yeah.
saying that has become relevant because I say some players have been, as you said, critical of table conditions, arena
Mm.
conditions. But yeah, there's not many. you can't control the weather. It'd be nice if you
No,
could,
and I
but
feel for those players. I mean, I'd never criticise a player. I wish that they would always follow the correct procedure, which is to come and see me. Come and fill the form out and let us discuss it. If these forms are filled out and we don't do anything about it, then they've got every right in the world to complain and shout and scream. Sorry, the dog's getting in on this one now. Hey, behave. Um, it's because I'm home, so he's not used to me being here, so he's all over me at the moment. Um, yeah, so where was I now? He's ruined my train of thought. Oh yeah, so if the players follow the right, all the right procedures, then we will always do our very best to put it right. Even if they don't follow the procedures, we'll still look at it, but it's a lot easier for them to tell us directly what the problems are, and we can look at specific aspects of it. So
fair enough. Alex
it
Duran.
wasn't just the table. What was the other part of the question? Sorry, if you got it there.
Oh, does the tournament director work act as a conduit between WST and the people at the tournament, the referees, commentators, players?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I always make a joke about it, and I say that as a tournament director's role, if everything goes well, then it was a massive team effort, and everybody ran the tournament, and if it goes bad, then it was a tournament director's fault. Because pretty much we're at the core of everything. We we have a little bit of involvement in virtually every aspect of the event, and a big involvement in a few aspects. So yeah, we're dealing with the players. When there's issues, they come to us. If the referees have issues, they come to us. If the table fitters have problems, they come to us. And it's not always we can give them the answers, but there's always got to be somebody that you report back to, and that generally is the tournament director.
An email from Alex Duran. Hello, Dan and Paul. Paul, is the tournament director involved in disciplinary matters like players not showing up for a match on time, unsporting behaviour, or, God forbid, match fixing investigations? Dan, I'm loving the guest you've had on the show recently. Thanks, Alex. Well, thank you, Alex. What can you say about that, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, the referees obviously at the table will deal with things like unsporting conduct. That's up to them, and there's a procedure in place for that. We have a warning system. Players can be dock frames or even a match. In the event of particularly bad behaviour, which fortunately in our sport you don't see. They're very well behaved in general. I mean, I still think it's the only sport in the world where players call fouls on themselves. You see footballers throwing themselves to the ground for no reason, appealing for corners and things when they know the ball came off them. And, in snooker, it's completely different. So we don't have many issues. I mean, you do hear of warnings for unsporting conduct. I think the most common one is when a player concedes a frame when they can still win. Now, we class it as unsporting conduct because they're told that they shouldn't do it, because obviously there are gambling markets where, taking away the match fixing aspect. But, there are people like to bet on snooker matches, and you can bet on foul points conceded, you can bet on total points scored, all these things. So a player conceding before they need snookers, we've generally said, well, even if it wasn't the case, that could be construed as, you fiddle in the gambling market. Um, but I understand as well, players through frustration, if they've left the frame ball hanging over the pocket, they're so frustrated at doing it, they just concede. They don't think about the score and the fact that the ball should be potted first. So although they get a warning for unsporting conduct, we know there's no malice in it. They didn't really intend to do it. But if you don't punish it in some way, then it's going to carry on. And, when it used to happen, it was becoming an issue, and it's something that we've dealt with. You have other issues where I mean, people talk about slow play. There's no such thing as slow play in a rule book. There's a time wasting rule. And time wasting can be dealt with, by a referee. So that side of it is all down to the referees, and then any issues they have, any warnings they give will get reported back to me, and then, or me or whoever is tournament director, and the tournament director will then decide whether it needs any further action, whether we send it into WPBSA, because they have a disciplinary committee, and any serious offences we send into them. As regards the match fixing, I mean, obviously that's something that blighted us over a few years. I think we've definitely cleaned it up now. Um, I was asked to sit in on one or two matches. If we get prior notice, you might see an irregular betting pattern, and the gambling commission will be on to us and say, we're a bit concerned about this match. And they'll ask people to sit in and watch. Obviously, I'm not a player to a professional player's level, but I've watched enough matches over the years, and you can tend to tell when things aren't quite right. So, yeah, I've been involved in that side of it. Yeah, so I suppose we do have a big say in that, in all those aspects, but it's not a problem we have anymore, hopefully. It took a long time to find out about a few things, and I do think now it's gone away, or at least I hope so.
Hopefully, hopefully, it's not a good look for the sport.
No.
The final email came in just this morning, so just before the cutoff. And I suppose speaking of cutoffs, it's a question from Sean. Sean's regular correspondent, and it's a question about the broadcast cutoff at the World Championship qualifiers earlier this year. The match in question was Joe O'Connor versus Matt Selt, and it went quite late. I think it was 10-8 in the end, but the final part of the match wasn't available to watch. There was a lot of, I won't say rage, but people were frustrated that they'd watched the whole match but couldn't watch the end. Would the
Hmm.
tournament director have any say in that in terms of the relationship with the broadcast partners, or no?
No, I wasn't actually there at the qualifiers. I remember this happening. I was actually setting up the Crucible when it all happened. I think from memory, the situation with that was something to do with the internet lines because you only book them for a certain amount of time. The amount of bandwidth that we need, there's not many venues have lines in that will provide that. So we get temporary lines put in, and you only lease them for a certain amount of time. Now, they're generally pre-booked with set times to turn on and turn off, and it isn't the situation where you can just pick up a phone and say, "Oh, do me a favour, can I have an extra half an hour?" And from memory, I'm pretty sure that was what happened there. As you said, it went on a lot longer than was expected. And I can't 100% remember, but I'm sure that was the situation that the lines got turned off, and that was why we couldn't keep broadcasting. We would have had an internet connection, and we would have been able to maybe push out a bit of audio, but we certainly wouldn't have had the bandwidth to show pictures. But no, that's not something at the tournament. I mean, the tournament director, trust me, I think it was Rob Spencer was tournament director there with Gary Wilkinson. That they would have been tearing their hair out. Trust me, that they wanted it to be broadcast and they wanted everyone to see it. But big technical things like that are really beyond our control. We try and get them booked in the first place and make sure they're available. Um, and if it was the case that it was turned off because that was the timing, then I'm sure for next year, we'll learn our lesson and maybe we'll book a whole extra day. I mean, these things don't come cheap, but like I said, it's not always about the money. We are a profitable company and we want to deliver the best product. So that there will have been an inquest, I'm sure. And like I said, I wasn't involved, so I don't know the full outcome. But yeah, it wouldn't have been down to the TD, and the TD certainly wouldn't have been happy. So.
And I remember listening to Dave Hendon's Snooker Scene podcast, and one of the correspondents to that podcast was, well, I'm going to say more than angry, was furious that they couldn't watch the end of the match.
Hmm.
And this correspondent described the people involved in making this decision as morons. And Dave Hendon vigorously defended the crew, saying, no, they're not morons. They have to work within certain restraints. Obviously, they are humans. There are technical issues which people just cannot control. Has
Hmm.
there ever been a time where you've had to deal with really angry people? On
Yeah,
is it?
it's something that we do get every now and again. I mean, you get people at a venue, will buy a ticket, pay a premium price for a ticket, and maybe there's something in their way. It's like restricted view. I'm having a couple of days off next week, and my wife and I are going to the West End to see a show because it's something that we enjoy doing. And then if you get a restricted view seat, it's something that you expect to know about beforehand. And snooker events or snooker venues, they're not permanent structures. So every now and again things change. And I think that's the only time we get very agitated people that we deal with face to face are in those situations. But there's nearly always a resolution, and if there isn't one, we'll find a way to put it right afterwards. Whether it's providing tickets for another venue or a refund. I mean, obviously a refund doesn't make up for the disappointment if you've travelled and you're expecting to see things. So we understand these things. Um, I mean, as far as people, somebody referring to them as morons, I mean that's horrible. If you break it down to something like if you're building a house, you need everybody to work with you. Your plasterers, your plumbers, your electricians, they've all got to have a system in place. And it's very much the same with the snooker tournament. Your TV broadcast crew, your behind the scenes crew, your staging people, everybody has to work together. And that particular incident where, we couldn't broadcast the end of the match, that wasn't down to one person really, although I think it was the fact the internet was turned off. There are a lot of people involved in that, and if it was a human error or if it was one person responsible, then fine, but then also that person hasn't done that on purpose, I'm sure, and
Yeah,
we all make mistakes at some point in
yeah,
our
no
lives,
one's
and
perfect.
it's very easy for people behind the scenes to shout and scream. And I mean, I've experienced it very often when I've been refereeing, when I've made correct decisions that people haven't understood. The keyboard warriors jump on social media and absolutely destroy you, but then when somebody kindly points out what the rule really is and the fact that I had it right, you never get an apology.
No,
Nobody ever says,
that's
"Oh,
the way.
sorry, I got that wrong." They just go quiet for a while. And it's an unfortunate thing, and it's not just in snooker, that's in life, so it's just things that we have to put up with, really.
Yeah, it's always easy to moan about the bad points, but it's easier to forget about the positives, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we could end remembering Terry Griffiths. Terry Griffiths passed away a few days ago.
Mm.
I started watching snooker in the early to mid 90s, 94 final, as many people have heard many times on this podcast. That is my first memory of snooker. Terry obviously had a great career before that. What can you tell us about your experiences with Terry Griffiths? Griff.
I'm very lucky that Terry became a friend. He was somebody that I admired and looked up to, particularly being Welsh myself, and he was the Welsh player of the day. We had Doug and we sorry, my earbuds are playing up here. Yeah, we had Doug and we had Ray Reardon, but Terry was the one at the time. He was sort of the main man. He was the one that was still winning and doing well before Doug's resurgence, really. When he came back and won the UK in '88. But yeah, Terry had been around a long time. The first tournament I ever worked at, only as a marker and a scorer, was the Welsh Professional Championship, and I got to meet Terry there, and that was amazing. I was only about 16, I think. And then the more I refereed, the more opportunities I had to go to Terry's club in Llanelli, which he had a fantastic club there, which he cared so passionately about. He looked after a lot of players, a lot of the youngsters in particular. He went on with his coaching and all the things he did. He was a fantastic guy. It's very easy when people have left us, to say how wonderful they were. But Terry he's been spoken about fondly, all the time he was with us. It was always good for him to walk into a room. He was very straight. He told it the way it was. The way he thought was the way he said it, and you appreciate that from people. Um, he was very funny. He's the most sarcastic person I've ever met in my life. There'll never be another Griff in that way. And yeah, we're really going to miss him. He was good to be around. I mean, obviously we haven't seen him for a few years. There were certain people who we knew what he was going through. We knew he had dementia, which is obviously a horrible illness, and it took him away from us for the last few years. And it's sad it's now come to an end, but it might also be a bit of a blessing. When he was suffering, obviously his family was suffering. So yeah, I'll always remember him fondly. Yeah, I'm going to miss him not being around.
I think hearing a lot of the tributes, the two attributes of his character that are really being spoken about are, as you mentioned, the sense of humour, the sarcasm, but
Mm.
the humility. And I mentioned it in the previous episode. I spoke with Michael Day from Totally Snookered. In the autumn, I spoke with Colin Matty, WPBSA coach, who had learned from Terry Griffiths. And
Yeah.
when Terry said to Colin, his student, that I'll probably learn something from you today, and Colin just, well, you're Terry Griffiths, you're former world champion. How can you learn from me? But I suppose and I said it to Michael, what I took from that is that there was no arrogance about the man, and we can never achieve perfection as people or as sports people, and we might pick up something new. And that told me he knew who he was, and that we're always learning.
Absolutely. I'll give you a quick story that this is one that I'll treasure, and it involves a letter, and I'll keep the letter forever. But I'd come back from Australia probably 6 or 7 years ago, been doing a tournament out there. So I travelled for 27, 28 hours by the time I got back to the house. And as I'm outside the front door, the phone rang, and I think it was about 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and it was Terry. So I'm thinking, well, whatever it is, he wants a favour here because it's a Saturday morning and he's ringing me. So anyway, I've answered the phone and he's explained that he'd been doing some coaching in London a few days before, didn't fancy driving, so he'd got the train from Llanelli via Cardiff through Newport and gone down to Paddington. And anyway, he'd done his coaching, he'd come back, and he'd had a new pair of glasses that week, and he'd left his glasses on the train. So he's made all the inquiries with the rail network about getting the return from lost property, and it turns out that the only lost property office for that route was in Newport. So he's rung me, obviously knowing that I live in Newport, and said, would you do me a favour, rather than me drive from Llanelli up to Newport, could you pop into the lost property office for me, see if these glasses are there, and then if they are, perhaps put them in the post, or I'll get them off you, when I see you next. So, yeah, no problem. So I have to wait till the Monday morning. I go to the lost property office. They must have had 150 pairs of glasses in this lost property office. I've never seen the glasses and the case before. And the name of the optician from Llanelli was inside the case. So we've had to open all these boxes, look inside, found them. And as you can imagine, if there was 150, it was the 148th box was the ones that we were looking for. So anyway, I've got these glasses. I've from right outside the lost property office. I didn't even get in the car. I rang Terry. I said, "Look, I've got them, mate. They're here." And oh, brilliant. He said, "Would you put them in the post for me? Because I'm looking at the schedule. I probably won't see you for 5 or 6 weeks." Yeah, no problem. So he texts me his full address, and I've walked straight to the post office, parceled them up, put them in the post. So then I get a message, "Can you send me your address?" I'm thinking, well, why does he want my address? So I sent it anyway, and then 2 days later, this letter arrives. So I open the envelope, take the letter out, and a £20 note and two £10 notes fall out of the envelope. And like people generally don't send cash through the post. I'm thinking, what's this all about? So when I've looked at the top of the letter, it's Terry Griffiths, OBE, with his address on his letterhead, and a lovely handwritten letter. And it says, just to let you know, I received the glasses this morning, and thank you so much for your help, Paul, in recovering them. I tried to think of a way to repay you, and I thought an ideal situation would be the next time we're at a tournament, I'll take you out for dinner. But then the more I thought about it, I realised I actually don't like you that much, so use 40 quid, have a great night out. and that was Terry all over, he was just that was the way he was. And yeah, I've still got that letter, and it's something I'll keep, and those are the memories we have of him. So yeah, I mean yeah.
That's good. That's good banter. Good banter. Excellent. I think well, do you know what? That's a nice spot to end on. A happy moment, because his his passing is a sad moment. But I think in moments like this, for people like this, I always think it's better to remember the good times. I always prefer a round of applause rather than a moment of silence, in my opinion. So
Yeah,
let's end on a high note. Paul, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. It's
you're welcome.
so interesting to find out new perspectives from different parts of the snooker world, and that's one of the aims of this podcast. As I said, I'm very, very grateful for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Cheers. It's been nice talking to you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet you, mate. Cheers.
Thank you again to Paul Collier for joining me on the Snooker Hall podcast. A fantastic guest, and I appreciate him taking the time to share some of his experiences. The Scottish Open gets underway today. Let's see if Gary Wilson can make it 3 in a row in Edinburgh. Judd Trump has pulled out, so that certainly won't hurt Gary's chances. I'll be back next week to recap that event and the shootout with a very special guest. Thank you to everybody who has got in touch with the podcast. If you want to rant, get anything snooker related off your chest, share some stories, share some opinions, get in touch and share your thoughts with the Snooker Hall community. The email address is contactus@thesnookerhall.com. I'm off now. You guessed it, to watch some snooker. If you celebrate Christmas, don't forget to finish your shopping on time. Don't spend too much money. But until next time, take care.